This is the Cultural Fluency podcast with Angel Pretot, the French coach. That's me. And today in episode number 4, I am with Ashton Colby. Ashton, welcome. Thank you for accepting my invitation to be on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, me too. I'm really so excited and curious about what you do. You are the founder of a company called Gender Youphoria, which is of course a link to the concept of gender dysphoria. I guess we're going to speak about that. And Gender Youphoria is a social enterprise on a mission to change the global and interpersonal disempowering narratives about transgender people through compassionate communication, inclusive media representation training, a lot of work in there, and coaching trans people how to not just transition, but thrive in every area of life. And you write on your website something that's very true, unfortunately. Transgender people are deliberately alienated from their spirituality and their ability to use the body as a tool for emotional self-regulation, and you are here to change that. So personally, with me being trans masculine myself, I understand very deeply what you mean, but for our listeners that may not be very well aware of what that is all about, can you please give a bit more explanation as to how this works?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm transgender, and I was, assigned female at birth, and I lived for 20 years as a girl, as a woman, and then
that makes two of us.
Yeah.
I mean, 30 years in my case, so yeah.
Yeah, and realize, to be more of the person that I am in my heart, to really show up more fully, I need to transition to show myself in the world that I can show up as this divine masculine being. So I started taking testosterone about 9 years ago, and really allowed myself to step into my masculinity and just transition to be a man. And then so with the work with Gender Youphoria, and it's spelled YOU, like Euphoria. And the link to that, the play on that is that, you have to be at this point diagnosed with gender dysphoria in order to, in the US at least, to gain, and many places, to gain access to medically transitioning through surgery and hormones to feel better. And, a lot of people, you and I included, understand the power of the narratives you take on, the stories you tell about yourself really do impact your experiences in the world for better or worse. And so I think that narrative of gender dysphoria, it's like, well, what if I was just trying to be more of the person I already am? Like, what if I was trying to reach a state of gender euphoria? And like what you focus on expands. So I work with companies in the media to make sure they're telling authentic, real stories that are not just really focused on the surgery and the body and the physical stuff that can get kind of bogged down. And then, I'm a trauma-informed yoga teacher, so I teach trans people how to regulate their nervous system, feel present in their body. And then I coach trans people, especially like leaders that are out here doing this work very publicly, who are absorbing all these really toxic narratives and still want to show up fully and authentically in their body and in their power and their purpose. So I'm trying to work on it from all areas. So yeah, thank you for letting me talk about this. I'm so excited to talk with somebody who has, just a similar life experience. It's pretty unique. So yeah, thank you.
I mean, similar-ish, I would say, because it feels like when I hear you talking, it feels like you're 10 steps ahead of the situation we have in Europe. Also, when I read your website, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to arrange an interview with this person who lives literally in the future, assuming that we are indeed moving in the right direction, because I'm not completely sure. I mean, you say in the US, you have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and that's not great. Yeah, but I was diagnosed with transsexuality, which is supposed to be a mental disease in Germany. 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I think it still is like that. And it's like, for me being diagnosed with gender dysphoria, that would be a big step ahead if we get there.
Let's talk about that. That's like, how does that, like, how do you feel when that happens, like that you have to be diagnosed with something that's considered, because in the US, like, still, like, we have this diagnostic statistical manual that all doctors, medical professionals have to read and go through, the DSM. And it has gender dysphoria labeled in there. And and the name, call it what you gotta maybe name it something for insurance to get medical access to stuff. But yeah, I mean, the stories that go along with it, like, yeah, even a few years ago when I first came out, actually in 2012, it was gender identity disorder is what I actually have
still would be better than what I have
diagnosed. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, where do you feel like things are at with that, like with transsexualism? Like that's a whole other, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah,
it feels like I mean, and this is Western Europe, so imagine like the rest of the world. Like Western Europe is not that far ahead. I find there are many places that worse. It was not the first stupid mental health diagnosis I got. So I was like, oh yeah, doctors have their own like mindset or their frame of mind. Definitely. Like really my experience transitioning in Europe is very much playing a role, like pretending to fit into a narrative so that the doctors or the whoever I'm in touch with in the system would let me do what I want to do best I can. And I played the role of like perfect man in the doctor's office, and then I played the role of the perfect man in court. So they would change my passport, my gender marker. I went to a court in France with my wife. Look, I'm the perfect straight male. You have to acknowledge me, and it's ridiculous. And the more time passes, the more it feels ridiculous because I'm being more and more removed from that experience. And I'm really gender fluid. And I was gender fluid all along. Like I knew from the age of 29 that I was gender fluid because that's when I discovered all of the labels that can exist and all of that. And like the story of how I discovered that I'm trans is pretty unique. Maybe I can tell it because I don't think I've told it on this podcast yet. I met a trans woman at an Esperanto Congress completely randomly. She just happened to be there, and we became friends. And so I was genuinely really curious about the topic of. I didn't know anything about me being trans at all. And I asked the stupid question that everybody asks you, which is, I asked her, how do you know that you're a woman? Because I was completely clueless about how trans people felt or anything. Like there was zero information. I mean, you have to think it was 7 years ago, and in Europe, no social media, no nothing. I mean, well, there was a bit of social media, but no like to the kind of level that we have now. And so I asked her, how do you know that you're a woman? To which she returns me the question. And she goes, well, how do you know that you're a woman? At which point I'm like, it's because I have the woman body, like, I have like breasts and vulva, like it's woman definition. And she told me, no, you're lying. And I was like, oh, okay, I understand you're trying to say something important, but I genuinely do not understand what you are saying. Is there any other way that you can explain it? And then she said, I'm a woman because I feel like a woman, and you're a woman because you feel like a woman. Like it's a way that you feel. And I was like, what? you feel like a woman? I don't feel like a woman. Like what does that even mean? Like feel like a woman? What the hell? And she said, well, okay, like let me turn the question differently. Like if you with your personality and like your soul and your mind, if we take this and we put it in a man's body, would you then be a man? And I was like, yes, isn't that how it works? And she was like, but you wouldn't have any problem with that if that were to happen? I was like, it probably would be weird at the beginning, but I don't see why it would be a problem. And she was like, well, congratulations, you're trans. And that's when I realized that the rest of the population does not feel like me about this topic.
Totally.
And for me, I just assumed that like you had a body, you were labeled male or female, and that was it. And, and it took until I met a trans woman at age 29 to realize that people actually feel like they belong to their gender, which they're assigned. What?
Yeah.
I still don't get it. I still
felt sense. Yeah, it is. Yeah, there is really like a felt sense that if you don't, if you feel like you are something else, that it's like it really is a soul thing. It's such a spiritual thing. It's such a soul thing. It's such an emotional thing that it's almost like an essence. It's hard to even describe to people, but they know what it feels like if they feel aligned with it. And what you were talking about, like the gender fluidity, or the non-binary aspect of how you really feel, and having to feel like you had to go to court and your name change, and feel like you had to put on be a straight couple, and you had to be
Yeah.
the perfect man. You had to go to the doctor and tell him, oh, I'm a man, in the waiting room, and all these kind of things that like you I it's so, even across culture, like, and everything, I know that experience so deeply and so intimately, even here in the US. Like, I really did feel like, and that's kind of where even gender euphoria was inspired by, because I did a lot of reflecting, and it sounds like you're reflecting too on the fact
Yeah.
that, you know, with even how you realized you were trans, is that it wasn't because like you had this, and correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't this moment of like, I hate my body. It was like
Yeah.
oh, somebody's describing a way of experiencing my inner experience, my felt sense of my
Mm-hmm.
gender, my soul, aside from my body. And for me, like, it wasn't this moment when I like was like, okay, I think that I need to transition. It wasn't like, oh my God, I hate my body. It was like, okay, my soul is not aligned with my physical representation to the world and the way I'm showing up in the world. And it is this felt sense, this incongruence. And so, yeah, I had to go to the doctors, and I had to say to the psychiatrist, like, okay, I'm a man, and I've always felt like a man. And here's pictures of me as a little kid dressed up like,
Mm-hmm.
a superhero boy. And so here's proof that I am really trans. And, I felt like that too. And then, you know, I love that in conversations like this, I can talk about the spiritual aspects of stuff that I have really, I think politically and socially, it's easy to say, oh, I'm a trans man, and people can kind of get that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Born a woman, transition to a man, like, but that doesn't even resonate for the people that really know me. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm so much more than that. Like, my soul just happens to be more masculine, and this is the best way to describe it. So I'm so with you on all this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, socially, I adjust my label to the person I'm talking to. So if I'm in a
Yes.
situation where I
Yeah.
don't want to have a conversation, I say I'm a straight man, and that's it.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a situation
Yeah.
where I think it's
Yeah.
like, if I'm on a date, for example, I can't pretend to be a cis man because something will go
Sure.
wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I also only choose to date people, well, mostly women, who will have an understanding of that.
Right.
It reduces the dating pool, but it also reduces your chances to having boring dates. So I'm on
I'm
board
with
with
you
it.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
very
Totally.
rarely do
Yeah.
I find someone to whom I can express my gender completely with, like, as in I'm gender fluid, and even go as
Sure.
far as to, like, because almost every day I feel different about my gender. So some days I will feel more masculine, some days more feminine,
Mm.
and sometimes I will sit, straightly in the middle. And I find it interesting to realize, like,
Yeah.
how I feel over time.
Totally.
But society isn't ready.
Yeah, let's talk about how they're not necessarily like, ready, when genuinely, I mean, if I love that we're having this conversation, because if I am honest, yeah, truly, I do the same thing in certain situations. Who I'm talking to, I, based on the audience, I change how I describe it. And the closer you know me to my heart and what you're ready for, like,
Mhm.
because, I could say, oh, I'm like this genderless divine being that just resonates with masculinity. But yeah, I mean, like, I love what you just said about some days or every day you feel differently about your gender. And
Yeah.
we don't have that conversation either, that like you're allowed to
It doesn't
feel
it
more
doesn't last for a
masculine or
whole
more
day.
feminine.
I mean,
Yeah,
it changes in a matter of hours.
because it's, for me, gender is very much an energy and a
Mm-hmm.
relationship to, like, the energies, the cosmic divine energies that are like divine masculinity and divine
Yeah.
femininity. And so, our relationship to those things can change throughout the day, just like our body temperature, just like our
Mm-hmm.
any, whether we're hungry or not. Like, they're all just different things that um are moving. They don't have to be these stagnant things. They can be a little bit more light and a little bit more playful, I think.
Yeah,
Then we make them so rigid and
yes,
structured, and
the rigidity is such a problem for me.
Yeah.
Because I mean, also my gender adjusts to the situation and to the people around me, which is interesting. Like I've spent years trying to figure out, okay, like what are the circumstances that I have to go in for it to flow one way or the other. And what I know is that if I stay stuck for too long in a particular role, I'm going to gradually feel very, very bad. And it's, but sometimes I don't realize it because I'm like, okay, like it was comfortable at the beginning. So I'm like that frog in the water, which has like the, you know, that story with the frog
boiling,
which gets cooked, the boiling frog.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's weird. Like the people around me probably aren't really getting it. I'm trying to like maintain a smooth situation for them to like not be too confused. But it's tricky. Yeah, I'm at a point where I'm like, yeah, I think I want to wear feminine clothing again. A bit more than I'm already doing.
Sure.
And yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna deal with that. I'm just gonna follow my intuition because that's the only thing I can do.
Yeah, following your intuition. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you're being called to do that, and I noticed this transition. I've noticed this pattern with other trans masculine people that they transition really like rigid binary, and then they kind of had this like awakening that it's not all about the physical stuff, and then they allow themselves to be more expansive. I've noticed that evolution. And I also noticed that like with all the chaos that's kind of going on in the world right now, there is this, you know, consciousness evolution that's happening, this awakening, and some people are, you know, are ready and willing and aware to see that, okay, you know, we are more than our bodies, and, you know, gender can be more than just, you know, male or female. And the people that are willing to like expand their ability to be compassionate really to what it means to be in a different body and not feel aligned with that, because it really takes you to kind of stretch your emotional muscles. If you're a cisgender person, if you're not trans in any way, and someone comes to you and says, hey, I feel non-binary, I feel like I'm trans, and you, maybe, I would assume like the first time you ever hear that concept, you could be a little uncomfortable. And you, in order to be comfortable with really that whole concept, you have to kind of stretch your muscles to be like compassionate to the deep felt sense that it is uncomfortable to be born in a body that doesn't align with your gender. And cisgender people, I notice like some of them aren't ready to make that leap, that depth of like, you know, maybe I don't have this exact pain, but I can recognize it and show up deeply for this other person that has this experience. And so I do see a really, I think that's why it's such a polarizing kind of topic, is there is a deep, it just mirrors the other kind of deep social and emotional and consciousness level divides that are happening at large. And I feel like transgender people are really at the crux of it, because
the big crystallization around us, right?
It says a lot about you in your level of personal development, whether you're able to accept trans people as they show up in the world or not. And you know, with, you mentioned like dating, it makes the dating pool smaller, but it makes it more interesting. And that's how I feel. I mean, I mostly date like you, which is like, you know, women, mostly cisgender women that and, you know, I'm usually like, you know, the more the guy person in the, right, you know, we're seen as usually like more of a straight couple when we're in the world. But I usually only date people that would be like spiritual, that would be really high level thinking, that would be able to be compassionate and flexible emotionally, to be able to really see me as more than my body. And so you date some really high quality people as a result of that.
It's a great filter.
Like that's
it's
exactly
a great filter. I really have two filters that I use. Like one is the trans filter, and the second one is the astrology filter. Like in the first few text message, I will mention something about the fact that I study astrology, and depending on how they react, I will decide whether or not there are people who are open-minded enough to go on a date with.
Yeah, I love that.
Because like because all the people who have looked into astrology think that there is something to it, almost all of them. Like it's very rare to find someone who thinks they have dug into it and still think it's, complete BS. So all the people who think really badly of astrology are people who have a strong opinion of something they don't know. And
Sure.
that is a bad red flag.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I've never heard astrology put like that. Yeah, I like if you, because I know like at least my moon sign and my rising sign and my sun sign. Beyond that, I don't know anything. But I'm here.
But
for
you're open-minded enough to know those.
I'm
so,
totally. So yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, a great introduction. I have a couple more questions that we can get into. Like, for example, you were saying that there's really a discrepancy in the level of personal development of people. You said several times in your content that God loves trans people unconditionally. That's not the message that we get from most religious people. So how do you deal with that? Like, how do you,
totally.
Here, I mean, around me, I don't have many religious people. It seems to be mostly a US thing. But then again, most people here have never even heard of trans person. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's with the religion thing in the US. Yeah, we have a really deep culture of like Christianity that really written into our like founding documents is really the separation of church and state, but Christianity really deeply affects our public policy and our the culture. Like if you kind of go outside of any kind of large metropolitan city area, it's totally like a day and night difference in terms of acceptance. You'll find accepting people in rural areas. I don't want to generalize at all.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily location wise, but in the places where, particularly in Southern America, in the South, like there's a lot of really deep roots of the Christian church that are hundreds of years old, that are still deeply divided. And so and again, it influences national policy and national culture. And and with the whole thing about God loves trans people, like I really find people who are in the more conservative religious side of things who can't understand that I could have a relationship with God and be transgender. And so that is so painful for me, because I have been raised in the church, in a Methodist church my whole life, and I've found a relationship with God of my own understanding. That's okay, cool.
All right. So yeah, that works perfectly now. Okay. We were speaking about the opportunity to pray the trans away.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who really want me to just pray to God hard enough, and then I will not feel transgender anymore. And when I first came out as trans, I really, to myself, when I first felt like I was trans, I did try to do that and it didn't work. And so after like 9 years, or 10 years now of the audio isn't working.
No. I mean, praying the trans away doesn't work.
Praying. Yeah, sorry. The praying it doesn't work. Yeah, it really doesn't work. Yeah, and so I had to realize that, like, who I am is not going to be based on the fact that I have to change this transness within me. And so I only, when anybody is anybody transphobic to me, I just obviously am hurt about it, but I kind of lean on my relationship with God even more. And So the analogy I think about it is with the praying the trans away or praying the gay away or anything like that is like people want me to go into my garden and go into my yard and I see weeds that are out like in my yard and they want me to just sit there and just pray about the weeds to go away. Where in order for me to actually do something about it, I could fully accept that there are weeds in my garden and then go out and pluck them out of the ground and then have a yard. And so the same thing that is with being trans is like, I can't just sit here and just pray it away. I can fully accept that I was born into a female body. I can then fully accept that I feel transgender without any judgment or shame. And then I can fully accept that in order for me to move forward with my life, I can go and do something about it. I can transition socially or physically or both. And the entire time, I can maintain a relationship with God. And really, I noticed there is a divide within the trans community. And I'll really name this. This is probably some notice that the intention that you during your transition really affects the outcome. And so if you're going into this and you feel like you hate your body and that transitioning physically is going to fix all your problems in your life and you're magically going to be happy for the rest of your life just because you change your body, like, you know, that's not really how it works. And you may hit a wall a few years into your transition and be upset and still be disconnected. And I think that there are religious people who see that and see that disconnection still and point to that, like, see, you can't just transition physically and it'll all be okay. But they don't make room for the people, or they scoop us all together and they don't make room for the people who have had a relationship spiritually their whole life or have developed one and realize at least at some point during their transition that maybe initially it was really about the physical things, but it's really a catalyst for a deeper awakening spiritually of realizing like the essence of who we are is so much more than our body. And that's so spiritually valuable. And we haven't made space for that because I think it's really uncomfortable for people to talk to people who, like, for me to tell a trans person that is so consumed with needing the physical changes, like, hey, those changes are not the only thing you have to work on. They get really upset and defensive and scared. And I have compassion for that. And I also have compassion for the religious conservative people who think like, hey, you can't just change your body and it'll change all your problems. And that's not even my experience. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk about that, like how there is this divide and there's so much more going on narrative wise. It sounds like you've experienced that too, like in so many different areas. Like, I'd love to hear about what your spiritual, relationship of your own understanding, like what does that look like in relation to your trans experience?
It looks extremely different for me because I think we have a lot less religious people here in Western Northern Europe than you have in the US. And so I haven't really been confronted to this kind of opinion from religious people. What I do have is that almost every trans person that I know is an atheist. They have no spirituality whatsoever. My ex-wife, for example, is one of them. She's my ex-wife now for a reason. Because I think she's the textbook case of that situation we should describe where transitioning just does not fix all of your problems. And it's the few trans people that have a spirituality in Europe, they feel even more isolated because they're going to be isolated from the trans community as well. Or like they will not be able to relate spiritually to the trans community because overall the trans community just does not have spirituality whatsoever. They're completely cut off. So like my life is a series of getting cut off from the environment that I've been in You know, I've been cut off from my family. I've been cut off from my country of origin. I mean, it was my choice, but you know, it still is something to deal with. I've been cut off from being an employee because I got fired for being trans twice within 6 months, at which point I decided to start a business. And that is why I'm here. And I still have this business. I've been having it for 5 years, 5 years and a half now. And but it's a choice that was so rare. I don't know a single other trans person in Europe who has a business. It's just me, which is crazy when you think about it. And the reason why I did it, like the story is insane. So I got fired for being trans twice in 6 months. The first time was in Austria, which I had lived there for 5 years. And then my girlfriend of the time, which is now my ex-wife, told me, oh, that's because Vienna is so conservative. This would never happen in Berlin. She's from Berlin. You come to Berlin, you're going to have a much better job. You're going to have a job that is worthy of you. It's going to be amazing. So I went, and it took exactly 5 months until I was fired again. And yeah, I took basically just the time that I needed to get settled. And I found myself in a situation where I had no job. I was completely traumatized because it had just happened again. And also, like, it's not just the being fired, it's like the whole process of, you know, being put through this like gaslighting throughout being in your job, and just the colleagues who don't understand you, or those who do understand you don't understand why you have a problem because they just don't see the transphobia of the others. And then I had worked in Germany for only 5 months, and you cannot get unemployment benefits if you haven't worked in a country for a year. And you have to have worked for a year in the country in Europe to get unemployment benefit. And in theory, it's possible to transfer the benefits from a country to the other because it's the European Union. But in practice, I don't know a single person who has succeeded. And I found myself having zero income. And I had just decided to transition because I couldn't take it anymore. For me, it was never really a problem of my body being wrong. I actually love my body as it is. It's very female-like now because I stopped taking testosterone almost a year ago now. And I haven't had any surgery. So I've just basically returned to the regular body that I had before, except for the voice and facial hair, which I love. And I really appreciate my body like it is right now because it's very close to what I had before, which I already loved. And it is also male passing because for me, it was always mostly a social problem. I never appreciated to be treated like a woman, and I still wouldn't if it would start again. So I had decided that I just didn't want it anymore. Like I would probably kill myself if I had to like go through the sexism of the tech industry again and all of that, because it's not just the transphobia, it's also sexism. You know, there are 2 layers of it. Right. And I was like, okay, I'm going to transition, but I expected it to last 4 years until I could manage to have proper documentation that would allow me to have a job again. And that's when I realized, okay, I have 4 years. It would take probably 4 years, and I have 2 options. Either I can go and try to beg the government for money, which is what most trans people are doing, but it would be very difficult given that I was a foreigner and I hadn't worked in the country a lot, and I would probably be misgendered and be mistreated in all ways, you know, when you have to deal with the government. Or if I'm gonna work really hard anyway, I might as well build a business. And for me, it was a crystal clear choice. Like, it will be hard work either way. And it will be something like I will have to manage my mental health either way. So I can either try to beg for money and I'll get just however much money they want to give me, or I can build something. Why am I the only person who has looked at it this way and made this choice? I don't know. Because for me, it was an easy choice, but everyone has taken the other option. And I mean, this is Europe for you. People don't have a business mind, and especially not trans people in Berlin. Like, there's a really left-wing kind of mindset, which is like socialist basically, where people believe that it's the government's job to take care of them. And it doesn't work too well, but they keep believing, and they're miserable. And I didn't want to be one of them, so I was very much cut off from that community as well.
I really appreciate your vulnerability in sharing this and speaking this, and this is such a freeing conversation for me personally, and I in many ways, you know, feel the isolation that you're speaking about, in terms of like feeling like, where are all the spiritual trans people, and where are all the entrepreneurs that are trans and have the mindset of like, you know, like the spirituality. And yeah, with the like, we're on different continents, but I feel exactly within our community the same, like two areas of isolation. Like with the spirituality, like I noticed too, like there's a lot of trans people who are atheists. And again, like, if I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what you call it, as long as you're happy and you're healthy and you feel aligned in all areas of your life. For me, spirituality has been such a meaningful thing. And I don't care, I don't that whether you're a Christian or whatever, Buddhist, Muslim, I don't care what spirituality, even beyond religion, even if you just like have a faith in just some loving presence that's greater than yourself, and something to rely on, that you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to feel like you're doing life all by yourself. Like, that's so important, and that's for me been so life-saving. It's given me hope throughout, whether you call it the universe, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
even belief in, like, a connection that science can give us in quantum physics. Heck, I don't care what what your belief is in something, again, loving and greater, that connects us all, that's bigger than yourself. Fundamental for me. And I feel isolated sometimes in the trans community, finding people like that, because I do notice the divide that you talked about, where
Yeah.
there are like really people that are super just, and understandably so, like, without any kind of faith or hope, and feel really like, man, why the heck am I even trans to begin with? Like, kind of, screw this. And they are really, unhappy. And I get that. And then
Yeah.
the same with the divide of, with the entrepreneur stuff, is that, um, you named something really specific that I know of like, either way, you're going to have to figure out how to get money in this world in some way,
Mm-hmm.
like whether you are slogging away at a really crappy job, or you have to, work through the systems of the government to try to, get benefits from them.
Yeah.
Or whether you are an entrepreneur, you have, as a trans person, you really have to manage your mental health through all that. And I found immense freedom in spirituality and immense freedom in entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
that I want to shout from the rooftops, but again, have found a lot of, like, so much pushback and
Yeah.
isolation from my own community,
Mm-hmm.
of like, I want all trans people to realize, like, I have found so much freedom in, like, a spiritual connection of my own understanding, and I have found so much freedom in entrepreneurship. And if that can be something that trans people, like, feel a sense of, like, that they are worthy of, that they're worthy of spirituality, they're worthy of entrepreneurship. And I did, I don't have the exact same story as you, but I have a very similar kind of energy of, I, you know, realized I didn't really want to keep going to college or university here. Maybe this was like 6 years ago, and I was in the middle of my transition, and I had a calling to, like, do something else with my life, and I wanted to be of service in a different way. And so, in order to kind of get my feet on the ground and start moving, it was before I even knew I wanted to have this specific business or anything. I had to work a lot of crappy jobs, and I had to be stealth in those jobs just for
Mm-hmm.
safety reasons. And I
Yeah.
was really miserable and really disempowered, and kind of really mad at just, like, society, feeling like I had no sense of agency, um that, like, because I was trans, I was destined to, like, live and have these really crappy jobs, and that's just what trans people do. And so, yeah, I mean, with so much love, I say what I'm about to say. But I was hanging around a lot of friends that were really into communism, and were really into a lot of, like, really hardcore socialist things and
Mhm.
really deeply disempowering. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe they felt empowering, and it gave me a sense of hope at the beginning to hear like, okay, it is the government's responsibility to help us. And I've never really shared these beliefs in this way before, but I realized there is kind of a balance of personal responsibility and realizing we do need to have these social support systems, like all these things like healthcare and everything.
Mhm.
There definitely should have these basic fundamental human rights provided
Yeah.
by the collective that is like our governing body. I think that's beautiful. We should all have that. But I found this concept called social enterprise or conscious capitalism or social entrepreneurship, which is taking, you know, the good parts of socialism, the good-hearted places parts of socialism, which says, we should care about the environment and how business impacts the environment. We should care about how workers are treated. We should pay people a living wage. All those beautiful things. We should provide health care, and then taking the things that are positive about free market capitalism, which is, you can go out and very easily start a business, and you can go and figure out, how to make an impact in the world and create and have a sense of freedom to create and all those things that are really streamlined more in capitalism versus like a really government state controlled uh
Mhm.
way of being. And so kind of marrying the two is how I see the world moving in the direction anyway, which is more of like conscious capitalism, social entrepreneurship. So with what I've done, like again, being a trans person, taking back my power in a lot of ways, and becoming an entrepreneur has been so liberating. It's been like a kind of an fu to the people that want to hold me down in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I've yeah, again, I've found a lot of freedom. But with my business, when I work with companies, it is all rooted in like compassionate communication and using the ways that marketing can be either really toxic thing
Mhm.
about capitalism, or marketing can be a beautiful way to change hearts and minds, and using that for good. And then also like a big portion of what I make in revenue goes right back to me supporting people of color that are trans or have disabilities that are trans on a sliding scale basis, coaching them, or working with organizations on a sliding scale, or even for free to teach like youth yoga that are LGBTQ and stuff. That because I'm able to, because the next thing I would love to talk about with you is like kind of the idea around like an abundance mindset versus
Mhm.
kind of a scarcity mindset that I see a lot of trans people
Yeah.
have. And like and and the ways that um you know I want to shout from the rooftops also that like something that is so important, and that again I have a lot of compassion for, because I used to be like this maybe 6 years ago and 5 years ago, so I know this very truly, is just having the mindset of like expecting other people to take care of you, and to
Mhm.
outsourcing your personal power, and then also just like feeling like there's such a lack, and that the universe isn't going to take care of you, that there's not enough to go around. Like those are so many limiting beliefs that I see trans people, understandably so,
Yeah.
internalize. And showing them that there's a different possibility, and that the more money that you do make, and from a conscious, loving, creative place, like you with all your skills and talents and gifts that you're called to do with your business and share people and learn, or teach people, like those kind of things, the more money that you make doing those beautiful gifts, you can then give back and do more creative things and take care of
Mhm.
yourself. So I
Yeah.
after all that, I just said I'd love to hear about your experience with that kind of thing. And that's just another divide that I see, that I'd love to hear where you're at with that.
With abundance mindset, or with or with political
Yeah,
political
with seeing that in the
perspectives.
trans community.
Oh my
Well,
God. I
just
mean,
seeing it, well, yeah, with
in
seeing
the
it in our community.
it's not just the trans community, it's pretty much everyone in Europe. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of people who are into really like hardcore communism as well in Europe. I think a lot more than in the US, because we already have a much more socialist system. And um, of course, I wish we would be better treated by society. And I mean, given like that it has taken me years to get an ID, and that I had to like pretend to be something that I'm not, like in front of like every official person that I met. Of course, I wish it wasn't like that. But there's one word which I hate. It's the word should. You can't live on should. Like it should be different. Yeah, but it's not. Like, what you gonna do? You know, it's maybe
Interesting. Yeah.
it's a bit hardcore to put it this way, but like when I find a like the reason why I don't have any trans friends back in Berlin anymore is because all of them smoke pot and play video games all day, and I happen to not like video games or any kind of mind altering substance.
Sure.
And therefore we have nothing in common, because like you can only like transness is not something you have in common. Like you cannot build a relationship based on the fact that you have a common oppression. In fact, I tried to build a marriage even on it. I'm divorced now. That should tell you everything you need to know.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, it's very isolating, but I wouldn't want to be crying and feeling like a victim alongside the other victims. Like, no, thank you. I'm still hoping that I will find people that will resonate more with me. It's probably one of the outcomes of this podcast. I do find people here and there. Most of them are not trans. You're actually the first trans person that I speak to who can relate very deeply in this way. I'm hoping that there will be others. I have a few other people on my list of potential guests. But it is what it is. Like I'm not gonna throttle or reduce my mindset for the sake of fitting alongside the mind of someone else, because it's a bad idea, even alongside the mind of an entire community. Like we can all be victims together. Yeah, I get it. I don't want that. I realized like it's even, I took stock of my dating experience recently, and I realized that there is a little chance that we'll find a partner around me that will be a truly empowering person, just because the environment isn't that conducive. And that so I basically gave up on the idea, because the problem is that each time that I'm in the beginning of a romantic relationship, I find myself just trying to fit myself into the expectation of the other person, and that ends up being limiting. And I was like, no, like I'm not gonna limit myself to fit one relationship while I'm supposed to build a bigger business. Like I'm not gonna be able to do both at once. So I gave up on the relationship aspect. And often with the universe, when you give up, that's when things happen. So who knows? We'll see. But yeah, I'm at peace with that. And sometimes I guess you just have to prioritize, and you just have to admit that you're going to be lonely because you haven't met the kind of people that you resonate with. And I guess that's fine.
Yeah. There's totally value in being single. And I noticed that in our community, there's a lot of pressure to like get in a relationship and stay in a relationship that isn't working, to just be validated by your gender. Like if you date a cisgender person of the opposite gender, like that's so validating that people stay in toxic relationships.
Yeah, and, I've been there. I've done that. No, thank you.
No, I'm with you. And I'm with you about what you said earlier about like the smoking weed every day and playing video games. Like I used to do that every day, and I've lost friends throughout this transition process that are also trans because that didn't resonate with me anymore. Like getting totally sober and just cleaning up my life and moving into entrepreneurship. I had a period where I had less trans friends, but the lucky thing is that now as I've cleared out a lot of friendships that weren't serving me, I've found a lot of trans people that maybe they're not right in my immediate environment, but they're definitely here, and they exist, and like you and other people across the US, I found that are trans, that are entrepreneurs, that are out here, that are making a meaningful impact. Like they do exist. And so and same with the relationship. Like, again, sometimes you have to be single, but
Yeah.
I know there are people that like I've had to wait periods of time where maybe I've had to wait to find somebody that really accepts me, but then when they really do accept me, it's incredible, and it's really deep and a meaningful relationship. So all of that exists for us, like as trans people, and
Yeah,
we're
I mean,
worthy of deep friendships and relationships
it's really
and everything.
multidimensional. It's not just the being trans, because
Totally.
just the trans thing, I do find people who
Yeah.
accept that. I do feel very
Yeah.
lucky for that. It's like, and for friendships, it kind of works. But
Yeah.
it's really, I want someone who will be supportive of me in my business, who will understand like what it is to be an entrepreneur or a business owner,
Yeah.
and just who will, like, they don't have to be an entrepreneur themselves, although that would help. But I find that it's just not the mindset around here. Like, it's a different culture, and
Yeah.
it's
What do you
fine.
think
Like,
it takes to what do you think it takes to like have the mindset of an entrepreneur?
not being European, especially not French.
Not being French.
No, I mean, it's crazy. Like,
Sure.
I don't think I would be able to be a business owner if I wasn't estranged from my family. Like, literally.
Okay. Yeah.
It's that bad. You know, even if you strip aside the trans component and all like the other crap that's going on,
Right.
the business thing, that would already be a deal breaker for them.
Wow.
So
Just because they don't believe in like business, like
yeah,
as a way of moving through the world. Yeah.
yeah, they think
Yeah.
it's a recipe for failure. And I mean, my parents had programmed me to be a woman and marry a man. Like, when I was born, my
Sure.
father literally bought wine for my wedding.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
So you'd have it. Yeah. In
like,
age. Yeah.
I don't know if they weren't invited to my wedding, so I don't know if they drank so. But
Sure.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, and the plan was for me to go to university, and then eventually take one of those very French competitive exams that will allow you to be a civil servant and be married with the state for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
Because you have so-called job safety. And I
Right.
would probably have been a teacher, because that was what I was interested in. I mean, I'm a language learning coach now, French learning coach. So it still is kind of in that direction, but it's not at all the same as being a teacher in a state school in France. This is one of the professions with the highest rate of depression, and I'm speaking about cishet people.
Yeah.
So imagine what it
Yeah.
is to be a queer person in that situation.
Totally.
It would have been horrible. But according to my parents, it still was the best choice for me.
What do you like, what was your thing that like that made you realize like I even though there's all these people around me that are like that don't support entrepreneurship, I'm still going to do it. And I know I'm going to make it happen. Like, is there anything that like that there was this belief in yourself like I deserve to go out and make the money that I like want?
No, it
Or
was more like desperation. I mean, I told you the story. I
desperation?
was
Yeah.
basically, I got
Totally.
fired for the second time in 6 months, and I knew that whatever I would be going through next would be shitty for my mental health, and would just have me be working a lot, working very hard. And the choice was either begging the government for money, which would, be going from office to office, telling the story and trying to convince them to give me some cash, with being misgendered and mistreated. Which would have been horrible for my health, and would have been a lot of work, filling paperwork in German, and like,
Everything. Yeah.
or build an online business. And I knew it was possible, and I would be able to do it relatively safely, because I could sit at home, which, I mean, Berlin is a city that's not even safe for trans people. So, I mean, it's mostly women who have problems, but still. And so I was sitting at home for 2-3 years anyway. I had to do something with my time, and I didn't like pot and video games.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I feel a sense of I feel definitely a sense of safety in my mental health, my emotional health, like, my physical health, everything that's going on in the world, like building an online business, like that is the upside of it, is that you can do it from your house. You can create your own schedule.
You can do it on your own. You don't need a boss who's gonna be transphobic.
Totally.
Hell yeah.
That is right there. I've never heard, like, this is so obvious, but that's really true. Like, if you don't have to deal with bosses that are homophobic, transphobic, anything like that, and you get to control your your hours and everything like that. If I'm having a mental health day and I don't want to do anything, I can change my schedule around and everything like that. It's been deeply empowering. So
now I have these people who tell me that I'm lucky.
Yeah.
Because of my work situation. Not exactly luck, but okay, I'll take it.
Sure. Yeah. And it's hard work, but for me it's worth it, at least. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's been worth it to me to be an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Totally. Like I'm really working hard and smart at keeping my business and growing it, so I don't have to go back to, like, even though now, I mean, I pass as male, and probably it would not be as bad to have a job as a male as it was to have a job as a female back in the days, especially right when my mental health was the worst that it ever was. But I still would rather avoid it if I can, because it's definitely nicer.
I'm with you. I don't want to go back into the workplace and have to pretend that I'm a straight cis, white guy, and it's just not authentic to me. I have no shame about being trans. I want to be open about it. So
I wanted to ask you how you deal with that, by the way, having a business as an open trans person, because it's something that I've struggled with for a long time, and I'm not even really open about it. And like, of course, if someone listens to this podcast, they will know, but it's not something that's written on my website, contrary to you.
Yeah, I know that for me, my inner calling, like when I first came out as trans, again, like almost 10 years ago, my plan was to just transition and not tell anybody. I wanted to be completely stealth about it. I wanted to go to business school and go to law school and just go be an entrepreneur, but make it totally not about being trans. But little by little, I was like given the opportunity to share my experience, either one-on-one or on my college campus, and it lit me up to share it. And so more and more I started speaking about it and was just really called to just be open about it. But it took me looking at a lot of shame that I had about being trans, and then leaning into the fact that the more I was vulnerable enough to share that experience and what I've learned, it made me have such deep connections with other people that light was so powerful for me, and it felt so good that I had to just keep following that intuition and that guidance. And so I ended up building a business around that. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are in the personal development world that they have a challenge in their life and they overcome it, and that personal narrative becomes the kind of way that they then coach from or speak from or write books from and all that kind of stuff. And so I've done a similar thing, but I've used my stories as a vehicle, and I feel like I kind of in a lot of ways get paid to be myself. And so that's really empowering. And so I just share it because it feels better to share it than not. And I kind of balance, like some days I just want to be Ashton and not have anybody know that I'm trans. And so I've taken a break in the last year and a half or so to just kind of not be as open on social media, not like I have some projects kind of cooking in the background and I'm still like coaching people, but I got to kind of take a rest sometimes and care for myself. And, the plan is long-term, and the vision long-term is like, writing a book and stuff. And I'll eventually be even more open about it. But I have this inner calling to share it. And if I don't share it, I feel like I'm shut down in a lot of ways. So, but I mean, not everybody has to be open about it. So it's just whatever you feel most comfortable with. But I noticed that the more open about it and the less shame that I hold it in my heart about it, the more I attract clients that like really, really see me. And so I don't want to be for everybody, but the people who are, when I'm unapologetic about what I'm here to make an impact with, and I just share it openly, it's just like dating. You'll attract really quality people. You'll repel a lot more people, but then the clients that you do attract are really for you. they really will pay you what you're worth because they believe in what you bring to the table. They believe in the value you bring. They really see the vision and light and everything. Like that just allows you to just show up more fully in your business. So for me, it's been a business strategy, but it's also just been like, how do I survive in this world when the world tells me that I'm, less than for being trans? I'm just going to reclaim it, totally flip it the opposite way and just say like, this is the most interesting thing about me. This has made me more compassionate, more loving, more creative. And so if you're on board with that and you want to get some of that, like hire me. And if not, like that's cool, because there's a million other people that really are seeking me out to, as a client. So yeah. It's both ways. So
that's an amazing message. I think we're gonna keep it for like the last biggest part, because we are way we're over an hour mark.
Sure.
Yeah, I have something that I wanted to keep as like kind of a funny thing to do at the end. So there's this thing called the May test, which is for trans representation. It's normally about fiction, but I figured, what the hell, this is a piece of content, and there are two versions of it. Like there's one version which is adapted from the Bechdel test, which is that you have to have in a piece of content, typically a fiction, you need to have 2 trans characters that are identified. So check. They need to have a conversation together, check, and they need to be speaking about something other than medical transition. We did that. So congratulations. And there's the second version of it, which is more developed, which says the May test will ask whether a transgender character is one, portrayed by a transgender actor. Well, I mean, we are always up, so that doesn't really apply. 2, safe, stable, and secure, not homeless, assaulted, or victimized. I think we can say check.
Yeah, we're both thriving. Yeah.
The second is thriving, healthy, and happy. So check. The next one is in love, lovable, and dating. Well, I think I'm lovable. I'm not really in love or dating, but how about you?
I am. I am lovable and all the things. Check. Yeah.
Great, amazing. And the trans identity needs to not be used as a joke or surprise reveal gag. So no, we were pretty open alongside it.
Nope.
Needs to have an occupation that isn't sex worker, dealer, or thief. Check.
Okay.
And a storyline that is not solely about their transition or surgery or their struggle with their identity. It's a lot about identity, but it's not about the struggle. So
it's about creating a positive possibility model, and in other areas, entrepreneurship, spiritual, all these other things that are meaningful.
And bonus points if the trans character is in a lead role, which check, or has a gender queer, non-conforming or neutral gender identity. At least that's one of us. So
check.
Cool. But
I love
that's
that.
a really good,
really
good piece of content here. So where can people find you?
So probably Instagram is the most, or TikTok is the most social media that I go on. So it's just Ashton Colby or Ashton James Colby, and then also gendereuphoria.com, spelled YOU, and then also my website is just ashtoncolby.com, and my email is just info@ashtoncolby.com. And I love questions and all that. You can totally reach out to me. I try to get back to everybody and love having these conversations. So
it was
so much.
It was a great conversation. Thank you so much for being with me, and thank you for listening to this podcast or for watching it on YouTube. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe and please leave a review on your favorite platform or a comment on below if you're on YouTube, as this will help other listeners find it, and will also help me bring more amazing guests. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.